Hello and welcome to Bonus. This time for the gameplay I have some Pinball Arcade for you. I do like a good pinball simulator. I'm playing on the PS4 and I'm playing Elvira's Scared Stiff table, which is just, well, it's bursting with innuendo. Anyway, on to the comments and questions, and first up is 2625 Yoshi. As a fan of the Battlefield series, I do admit that BF4 was and still is extremely buggy and needs issues to be fixed. That thing about BF4 having too many weapons is true as well. There are a lot of copy and paste guns with one insignificant stat change between them. The game needed more time in development. In terms of community, they're as arrogant as any other gaming community, but at least you don't see XX Quickscopes XX playing on your server raging into his headset. I mentioned the Battlefield 4 community last week. I wasn't really having a dig at them. My point was they're just as bad as any other community, really. It is true that Call of Duty appeals to a slightly younger audience, and it seems as though quickscoping appeals to a certain group of people as well. There's nothing wrong with being young, though, I suppose. We've all been there. Heaven knows, if I had Xbox Live when I was a teenager, I probably would have been equally as irksome to the older generation. Just as well I grew up in a time before online play was commonplace, really. The Silencer 45 says, Stu, your thoughts on the new COD campaign commercial? Ah yes, Call of Duty Kevin Spacey, or Advanced Warfare, whatever they're calling it. This time, it's Sledgehammer Games up, for their first time really. I mean, they assisted on Modern Warfare 3, but they've never had prime placement as developer. So maybe we'll see a new, fresh approach to Call of Duty. Maybe. Everybody does seem rather excited about it, and, well, the thing is, I'm excited about Black Ops 3 because I really like the Black Ops series. I think Treyarch are a really competent studio, and, you know, while they're not perfect games, they are pretty good fun. So I'm definitely glad that Treyarch have got an extra year to make Black Ops 3, you know, hopefully really, really good. I'm unsure about Advanced Warfare because I just don't know. I kind of feel as though I'd like a year off from Call of Duty, but that's clearly not the most profitable thing to do, so that won't happen. And here's me and my channel trying to break away from Call of Duty and, you know, do a multitude of games, and everybody's talking like, oh, Stu, I can't wait for your Advanced Warfare guides. Oh, man. I hope there's only 2 guns in it. That would be nice. Just 2 weapon guides, boom, done. But seriously, I am going to have to consider my approach to it. I could do a year-long series if there are 50 guns, but I really don't fancy doing that. The Ghosts approach, that worked alright. 4 guides a week with about a month of pre-writing. But it's a heck of a gamble, that's for sure. The Cornelius V says, since the game is over a decade old now, have you ever considered covering the first Call of Duty game for your Retro Ahoy series? Do you know? I have, yes. It has about come of age now, hasn't it? Maybe in 3.5 years' time I could do a Retro Ahoy on COD 4. Now there's a depressing thought, isn't it? But yeah, a retrospective on the first Call of Duty game. It's a good thematic match for my channel, and I think although it has been touched on before by other videos, I think there are some interesting topics to be discussed on some of the slightly different approaches that Call of Duty had when you compare it to Medal of Honor Allied Assault. Plenty of interesting things to say about the evolution of the series as well, you know, from the emergence of the multiplayer paradigm in COD 2 to the huge success of COD 4 and then the yearly milking. So yes, very strong possibility. I don't know when, I'm not going to commit to any particular time frame, but at some point, once I've revived Retro Ahoy on my main channel, that will be a strong consideration. I'd also like to do one on Half-Life, and there's a few other big games I'd like to cover as well. Tommy says, hey Stu, I have heard you and a few other commentators say that Modern Warfare 2 was their favourite COD, but rarely did anyone ever expound on what was so fun about it. Was hoping that you could offer some insight. Modern Warfare 2, oh yes, fond memories. That was the game that got me into producing videos for YouTube, really. The hype levels for that game were off the charts. I mean, this was the follow-up to Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, which was, well, it was a cracking game. So myself, and I imagine a lot of other people, were excited for the true successor. Now, Modern Warfare 2 was rushed, it was buggy and unbalanced in places, but they managed to get the core of the game just right, I think. The key thing that I really like about MW2 is the kinesthetics. Basically the feel of the game and the feedback loops for the accomplishments and the things that you do. There are a large number of factors that work in concert to really sort of drive home a visceral and satisfying experience. The gunplay in Modern Warfare 2 is fantastic. Part of that starts with the sound design. Now, the guns aren't particularly realistic sounding, but realism is seldom the most satisfying approach when it comes to designing a game like this. I mean, guns are loud, they make a big bang, and if you don't have ear protection, your ears are going to ring afterwards. The only sort of thing that you really want to recreate from firing a gun in real life is the kind of the percussion, the feel, the sort of the thump in your chest as you fire. And that's something you can't recreate by just playing back a digital sample. I mean, sure, if you've got like a huge subwoofer set up, then maybe, but most people don't. And the really low frequencies, you know, the single-figure hertz values, you just can't recreate those at all. So this guttural bass response needs to be simulated in a slightly different fashion. And this is where stuff like the gun animation and the view kick come into play. I mean, obviously shaking the screen isn't quite as visceral as actually firing a real gun, but it's a subtle effect that actually, it kind of does add to the low frequency sort of sound. In addition to this, there are other visual effects. You've got like the muzzle flash. That's kind of a higher frequency response, which that lets you know the weapon's rate of fire. You know, when you see flash, 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 that's how many bullets you're sticking out. And this again works with the sound design. The higher frequency sounds, the very percussive but still distinct sounds of each bullet being fired. You know, the ba 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 ba. It's rhythmic and it all works in concert with the visual design, and it all sort of comes together really well for a cohesive and really impactful experience when you fire a gun. Then you've got the effects when your shots actually find their mark. And again, you've got the perfect union of the animators and the sound designers working together here to form a very cohesive experience. If you ever used a shotgun in Modern Warfare 2, you'll probably remember people flying away in a rather comical fashion. Same goes for explosives as well. You know, toss a Semtex into a building and you'd see someone flying. Wah! Actually, the screams upon enemy death are another fantastic part of the sound design. They immediately let you know that, you know, you've killed someone. And this ties in with the hit marker sound as well, which is a very distinctive, it's like a click. It's very distinctive, it's not too obtrusive, and you know when you've secured a hit. And because it's a very short sound, you can normally tell how many hits you've landed in quick succession as well. Whereas in some other shooter games, the hit markers feel a little bit softer. Like they fade in, you're not sure how many times you've hit them. So it's all these little details, really, I think, that make Modern Warfare 2 such a satisfying multiplayer game to play. Oh, now, obviously, you know, it had all of the trappings of AAA, it had a cinematic campaign, it had likeable characters, you know, think Ghost, think Price, and it had a reasonably well-honed art style. I mean, the graphics weren't amazing, but they were cohesive. And a cohesive art style always trumps any sort of technical ability of graphics, it really does. So a game like Modern Warfare 2, it's difficult to explain exactly what made it so good. And it wasn't perfect, let's not pretend it was perfect. But it was pretty good fun, and it really comes down to the fact that it was more than the sum of its parts. Every small detail, from the view kick, screen shake, to the muzzle flash, to the reload animations, to the sound design, everything worked together in concert to form a really beautiful experience and really satisfying gunplay. So that's my attempt at explaining why Modern Warfare 2 was good. Like I say, it's more about the subtle features of it than any sort of big thing. It didn't really do anything too different to FPS prior to it. I mean, Call of Duty 4 kind of established much of what it did. It's just Modern Warfare 2 took it to the next level, added some cinematic flair, and added more content as well. I mean, Modern Warfare 2 had more guns, more maps, more action. Just don't mention the glitches. Godsmack C says, Mr. Hoy, quick question. How many views are you expecting per episode in your Titanfall series? I'm really just hoping you get far enough to cover the Titan weapons. I don't really have any specific view goals for the Titanfall vids. I mean, I suppose with the game only being on the Xbox and PC, there is going to be a reduced overall audience, and, you know, I'm okay with that. I'm happy enough because I get to play a game that I quite enjoy playing. Overall, the vids are doing about as well as a low-end weapon on Ghosts, and Ghosts' views were already abated. So I don't expect to beat any records with this series, but I'm happy enough to do 10 episodes, because like I say, I do enjoy playing the game. And I do have some secondary goals outside of just pure views. Stuff like, you know, it would be nice if I could catch the attention of EA/Respawn. And it kind of puts paid to the idea that I'm some official mouthpiece of Activision. A series like this is also a reasonably good way of building up rapport with a certain community, and I'm sure there are some members of the Titanfall community who are quite grateful that I'm covering a game that they too are playing. So I don't want to cut and run and lose any goodwill like that. You also, if you do cut and run, you get this reputation for starting stuff and never finishing it. Also, if Titanfall 2 does prove to be a huge runaway success, It would be nice to have some Titanfall heritage on the channel, you know? Like, it would have been nice if I had COD 4 guides on my channel, just, you know, because it was a huge game and it's a cracking multiplayer title. But obviously at the time, YouTube wasn't that well developed, there certainly wasn't any gaming community, and the capture devices on offer, well, they weren't spectacular. I suppose I could have done it on PC, actually, in retrospect, but then everything looks easy in retrospect. Anyway, back to the question. My current plan is to do 10 episodes of Titanfall, then call it a day, move on to Iconic Arms. I would quite like to do the Titan weapon guides, but I don't think I can justify 16 episodes. 10 episodes in itself is a bit of a stretch, 6 would have been nicer, but covering all of the pilot weapons, I think that's probably a good place to call a break. Moonbear says, "Hey Stu, just a quick question about Cod Ghosts. Not about more weapon guides, but about how you got so many squad points. I generally sit at 30 to 90 squad points, but I didn't even have to unlock all the guns, and you did. But you had 300. So, tell me Stu, what's your secret?" Sadly, the only real secret is to play a lot. That's pretty much what I did. I suppose I did try and complete challenges where I could as well, but that much is obvious. You do get bonus squad points if you do a lot of challenges in a section. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, if you use a gun for a few hours, then you're going to get quite a lot of squad points. The Badger Boy 77 says, "Stu, what are your thoughts on Spec Ops The Line? Have you played it, or if not, heard about the rather controversial scenes in it? Would love to hear your opinion on it and the commentary it makes on mainstream gaming and games as an art form." I have played Spec Ops The Line. I'm not going to go into any specifics here, so if you haven't played it, I'm not going to ruin any particular scenes. But I will say that this game has been overrated from a critical perspective. It's upheld as this fantastic, you know, oh my word, look at it. It's a commentary on the state of modern games, and it does this by being a really mediocre game. And then it turns around to you and says, "Do you enjoy killing people in mediocre games?" And because it does this, it makes it not a mediocre game, it actually makes it a really insightful commentary. It's a mediocre third-person shooter that has quite a nice story. It's an attempt to recreate The Heart of Darkness, or Apocalypse Now, if you'd like. And the crumbling remains of Dubai is a fantastic setting. But it's a mediocre game, and it does have like a message, but it lays it on thick, and it's never subtle. Like, there's one instance where you're operating a mortar, and as explosions go off in the sky, you can see the reflection of your own face. And it's just done in a really ham-fisted way. Look, I mean, I commend the game for trying to do something like this. I just don't think it's as successful at it as some critics think it was. It was a mediocre game with an interesting message. Ultimately, as a composite, interactive experience, I had a mildly entertaining time with it. I mean, an anti-war message isn't particularly new when it comes to games. I mean, Cannon Fodder in 1993, that had a particularly strong anti-war sentiment. But it also was a pretty fun game, so it's a win-win there. I do think games can both be a commentary on the state of its own medium, and also entertaining in its own right. Spec Ops only partially succeeds on both counts. Darren Smith says, "Fun fact, the average gamer is actually 31 and owns a console." That's not fun. That's not fun at all. You've just reminded me of how average I am. Luke Pembo says, "Hey Stu, what is your favourite gun in the entire Call of Duty series?" Gameplay-wise, probably the ACR from Modern Warfare 2. History-wise, probably the FNFAL, because you didn't say I couldn't say the FNFAL, so I'll say the FNFAL. Frederick's son says, "Hi Stu, currently the Daily Mail are reviewing the details about a boy who stabbed his teacher. In their reports, they repeatedly mention he was a fan of heavy metal music and violent video games, saying he was obsessed with Dark Souls 2, and of course, heavily implying that these are the reasons for his crime. I thought we were over all of this nonsense. What do you think?" Well, the first issue is that you were reading the Daily Mail. I think these days it's less about appealing to their core audience and more about causing outrage with their appeals to their supposedly core audience. I think that's what drives the most of their traffic. As far as any link between violent behaviour and violent video games, I don't think there's any proven link. I mean, if anything, something like Dark Souls 2 would give a violent person an outlet. And of course, there's never any mention of the millions of people who have played the Dark Souls series and not stabbed someone. So the Daily Mail, full of rubbish, but then we already knew that. And cases like these, you know, it's an outlier. This guy who stabbed his teacher, clearly not a normal person. If there is any failure here, you can chalk it up to the mental health system, you can chalk it up to his parents, But within a suitably large population, you're always going to get a few people who are, well, you know, a little bit crazy. Maybe the violent video games are a symptom, but they're certainly not a cause. Blame Lag says, "You don't seem to be too excited about your marriage." I'm perfectly well excited, but I like to keep a division between my personal life and my video life. I don't mind talking about the way I feel about things. I don't mind talking about, you know, stuff that happens to only me. But when it involves another person, i.e. my wife, you know, I draw a line there because I don't want to intrude on her privacy. So you'll forgive me when I'm asked a personal question if I become coy. How was your wedding, Stu? It was nice. Moving on. Team Explosion says, "Do you plan on doing any more of the behind the scenes series? As someone who also produces content, I'm always interested to see other people's workflow to possibly improve my own and learn something new. This is something I wouldn't mind doing, but I haven't really had the time to do it. I'd really like to do like a video series on some of the aspects of my production, but it would be, you know, there would be a moderate investment of effort and it kind of falls behind the more entertaining stuff that I could do. Maybe one day I'll write a book or a proper series about my experience with YouTube and video production for an internet audience. But there's nothing immediately on the horizon. If you have any casual questions, though, feel free to ask them on the bonus, or I will respond via email or on Twitter. iHazar says, "Hey Stu, you seem to sound a bit hostile or slightly blunt when addressing matters related to Total Biscuit, in a different manner from which you usually address matters relating to other YouTubers. I'm not suggesting there's any bad blood or sour grapes about, but it just seemed a bit out of character for you. On that subject, how do you feel about the admittedly very small field of other YouTubers that do similar things to you on your main channel?" I don't have any beef with Total Biscuit, none whatsoever, and, you know, I do try to conduct myself in a civilized manner, and I do try to be polite when it comes to other YouTubers. And I was reasonably polite. But somebody referred to a video he made where he made an assertion, and I refuted that assertion. It was his assertion that games have to have a failure state, and I said, rather bluntly, that that's wrong. Most games do, but there are a few outliers that simply don't. Anyway, I do try to avoid mentioning other YouTubers because, you know, you don't want to get embroiled in any drama. And you've got to have a certain degree of respect for people who do similar things to that which you do. I mean, it would be nice if I was the only YouTuber and I had a monopoly on it, but that's not how it is. That's not how YouTube works. There are always going to be people who operate in a similar topic field to you, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, you can get mad, you can get defensive, but that doesn't do any good. It just makes you angry and frustrated. And if you start lashing out at other YouTubers because you think they're getting too close to your turf, then you just look like a petty fool, especially if you do it in public. So when it comes to other weapon guides, whether it's Drifter, whether it's T Martin, whether it's Ali A, whether it's who else, Raging Amish, whether it's Chris Spooner, whether it's any one of the hundreds of other little guys who do weapon guides, I'm sorry if I haven't mentioned your name and you're reasonably sized. That's the other issue, of course. You know, mentioning someone, you know, can cause offense, but not mentioning someone can cause a different sort of offense. But whatever, good general rule of conduct when it comes to interacting with other YouTubers: be respectful, be polite, and if they're doing a similar thing to you, you know, keep on. There's room for two. Maybe it'll inspire you to do better, maybe it'll inspire you to produce better quality content, or maybe you'll find your own approach, maybe you'll have your own style. Spider Vitria says, "So Stu, I've been around for a while, or at least since you started this whole answering questions in bonus videos thing, and I've noticed that you've gradually become more opinionated as time goes on. Used to be you never really took sides, now you've gone and called out the Battlefield community. I don't have a problem, mind you, just curious to see this is born more out of your comfort and stability with your channel's position, or as you've spent more time wallowing in the cesspool of opinion that is the internet." I think as time has gone on, I've become less meek when it comes to answering these questions. I suppose I've developed a persona, haven't I? You know, a bonus answering persona. Maybe some people prefer old Stu, don't know. But new Stu is new Stu. New Stu is where Stu is at today, so that's that. I mean, I'm at the point now where I have a certain confidence. I don't mind calling out certain groups of people. I'm happy to poke a little bit of fun of, you know, certain fan groups. Like, I mean, really, if you're that bothered about me calling Battlefield fans 14 years old, I mean, well, you must be 14 years old. There's nothing wrong with being 14 years old. There's really not. I mean, I used to be 14 and I came out fine. That's the thing about growing up. You don't really change. There's no sort of magical transition point from adolescence to adulthood. I suppose you just slowly learn over time that, you know, those adolescent impulses maybe sometimes need to be suppressed. Maybe sometimes you need to bite your tongue, be polite, and say, "That's all right. That's fine. That'll do." I've got about 3 minutes left of this pinball game, so I'll keep it running for a little bit longer. The Killer Donut says, "What I think Turtle Biscuit meant by failure state is that you can't lose. Doesn't only mean dying." Now, I didn't watch any of his videos or play any of the games he brought up in your counter-argument, but I still figured I'd say this. Yes, of course, you know, death is not the only failure state. It is, of course, the most common failure state, but it's certainly not the only one. Like if in Half-Life 2, if you lose your car at certain stages, it causes like a critical mission failure. Anything with a timer, you know, you've got the timeout failure state, stuff like that. But in the games I mentioned, Secret of Monkey Island, there is no game over screen. There's one that's used as a joke, but you know, you can't really fail the puzzles. I mean, the puzzles are there, and they're there until you work it out. You can't put yourself in a position, you can't win. There is no failure state. If failure to progress is a failure state, then you could consider failing to click the next page button on a visual novel a failure state, and it's just not. Anyway, with this whole sort of what is a game, what is not a game debate, I've said it before, but it's impossible, I think, to pin down an exact definition. The edges are not clearly delineated. There are no hard and fast rules you can lay down, because you'll always be able to find at least one exception. It's like I said when this question first came up, you've got to accept the fact that it's nebulous. You've got to accept the fact that it's not necessarily easy to pin down an exact definition. You know in your heart what is a game and what is not a game, and that's pretty much good enough. You can stick to a stricter definition if you'd like, but when you start excluding some pretty big games, people are going to disagree with you. Anyway, we've got about a minute left, so I guess I'll wrap up. This was a pretty good game of pinball, actually. I managed to get the Grandmaster score, which was nice. I've been on a bit of a pinball bender of late. I've been playing a lot of Pinball Arcade, and against my bad judgment, I've been thinking about getting a pinball table, like a real one. Like, you know, take up half your living room one. They're fascinating devices, you know, these huge electromechanical things. Incredibly complex, but utterly fascinating. And pretty good fun as well. I do enjoy, like I say, I do enjoy my pinball simulators. I haven't played them seriously in a while, though. I used to play them a lot on the Amiga. I played Pinball Dreams, Fantasies, and Slam Tilt as well, I used to like. But nothing really since then. Pinball Arcade, that's really what got me back into it, I suppose. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I shall see you on Friday for another Titanfall guide. It's the R97 SMG. So, until then, farewell.